Greetings, everyone. It's a little bit after 7. I am so very glad that you are all here. My name is Heather Harp, and I'm one of your city councilors. I represent Ward 3. In case anyone doesn't know, you have a total of 12 city councilors, 2 from each of the 6 wards. Jane here, this is Jane Kelly, and she heads up our Office of Neighborhood. She was my guiding light last year when we kicked this off for the very first Local Government Citizens Academy. And this is round 2. So hopefully we're a little bit better than we were last year. In fact, I know we will be. We have a lot in store over the next 8 weeks. Tonight, thank you for coming to Hellgate High School. I just want you to know one of the reasons why we're meeting here, and each night we're going to be kind of in a different location, is to highlight really where your tax dollars go. 50% of your property tax bill goes to funding public education. Of that 50%, 10% of that goes actually to the State Equalization Fund, so that communities throughout all of Montana have some money, additional monies coming from, I guess, us bigger cities to help out those really small communities that need additional financial support. 30% of your tax dollar goes to the city government, and 20% goes to county. So we have a lot of territory that we cover, and we figured why not highlight one of those particular renovations that we underwent. As you might recall, we spent a lot of money through our general obligation bonds to improve our school system. And over here on my left is Superintendent of Schools, Rob Watson.
Hello.
Hi, Rob. Hello. He's gonna talk to us for the second hour of tonight, and he's going to get into all the great details. And Rob, in case I haven't mentioned this to you before, but if you want to go on a tour a little bit later, we can do that too.
Okay.
And if not, we can do that exactly at 9 o'clock. The highlight here is the new library. It was enclosed, and it's just a really, really a tremendous treasure. I wanted to introduce 2 people in the back of the room. We have both Elena Hardy with the purple hair and Cindy Sandow. Both were cadets of the Academy last year. And what we're doing this year is making sure that to keep this going, because we can't rely just on one person to do it all, we're doing this on a voluntary basis. So if any of you are familiar with Leadership Missoula or Leadership Montana, this is kind of that model. So they're here to help greet folks, and next week we'll have a couple of different other people. Randy Solar contributed some snacks in the back, so back there's some treats. Please help yourself. There are restrooms down this hallway, as well as the one that you came down. So if anyone needs a break, feel free to get up and go ahead and do that. And with that, I would like to introduce Jane Kelly. I don't even know how long you've been doing this, but if any of you've been to a neighborhood council meeting, Jane is the genius in the back of the room that makes sure that things get done. Make sure that we always have all our chairs filled so that we have consistent leadership. When you step onto a neighborhood council, you are learning the ropes on how to govern. And potentially that leads up, if you will, into city council or our citizen boards and advisory commissions. And it's a great way to just get to know your neighbors, advocate for what's important in your particular neighborhood, and let us know. So with that, Jane Kelly.
Thank you, Heather. Okay. I have some good news for you. I'm not going to take an hour, so you'll have time to tour and everything. So I'm going to start at the beginning. In 1972, Montana had a constitutional convention, and people were elected to this convention, 100 people. There were all kinds of delegates from all over the state. There was a graduate student, 19 women, that's pretty good for 1972. There were housewives, a beekeeper, an IRS agent, and I'm sure there were a few attorneys sprinkled in there. So they got together and they worked for 3.5 months, and they came up with a new constitution for the state. And they appreciated things such as education and local government having control by the people, the citizens, and openness in government. So at the end of the day, all 100 of them signed the Constitution. And I do have a little something in your packet called Montana Voices 1972 Con delegates wrote the nation's best state constitution. And it is quite unique, and it has a lot of great things in it. So anyway, one of the things that they put in there is that every 10 years, your primary for the cities and towns and the counties, cities and towns and the counties is a question on your primary, and it was there about maybe 6 years ago. The question is, do you want to study your local government? Well, when it came up 6 years ago, Missoula said no. Ravalli County was a different story, but we won't go there. So anyway, about 25 years ago, when the question came up, the citizens of Missoula said, yes, we do want to study local government. Am I working?
The computer didn't keep
okay. So they said they wanted to study local government. So that was in May, in the primary. So in the fall, people ran to be elected to the Local Government Study Commission. And this came out of the Constitution, and it happens every 10 years. So they got together and they studied the local government in Seattle. They went to Bozeman to the Local Government Center. They studied government throughout the country. And they came up with some ideas. And it came before the electorate for a vote. I'm sorry, I don't have my page right here. I got it. Okay, it's on page 9. So this is the charter for the city of Missoula, and this charter gives the city of Missoula self-governing powers. We can't go against Montana Code Annotated, but we can make our own laws. That's number one, what this did. Number two, what it did was it made the elections in the city of Missoula nonpartisan. And the third thing it did is page 9. It established neighborhood councils. So it basically says the city of Missoula values the contribution neighborhoods can make to the governance of the city. So the purpose is to strengthen neighborhood participation where it exists and to encourage and support neighborhood participation where it does not yet exist. So city council established the neighborhood councils. So are you getting to see how grassroots this is? This really came from the bottom up instead of the top down. So we're very, very grassroots. And we are part of government advisory. So the neighborhood councils and community forum provide a structure for increased citizen participation in the governance of the city, and it improves communication, and neighborhood council duties shall be included to develop proposals for neighborhood plans and advising the city council, and the mayor on neighborhood and citywide issues. So that's basically what the charter is. Anybody have any questions about the charter? So this has been in effect since January the 1st, 1997. So we have our neighborhood councils, and I made everybody look at the map when you came in so you could see that there are 20 of them. And generally, each neighborhood council has between 5 to 7 members. There are some exceptions. The city attorney has read it, and it said that if you have needs to have more people, you can have more than 5 to 7 members on it. So they are pretty autonomous. Generally, you get a budget of $800 a year, with $25,000 is divided by, in the city, for a mailing supplement. So it's divided by population according to your neighborhood. So there are no requirements on how often you meet. I have some neighborhoods will have like 2 general meetings a year. Who's gotten a postcard? Everybody knows what the postcard is, right? The postcard comes out, and that's for a general meeting. We generally serve refreshments and food at those meetings. There's usually 1 or 2 for every neighborhood. And as far as their regular meetings, just the leadership team to meet, they meet as needed. Some meet once a month, some meet quarterly, some meet every other month, some meet as needed. It's really left up to the neighborhoods. And we work with the neighborhood since all of the people on the leadership team are elected by the neighborhood council. They are elected officials, and we have a few of them in here today. Who's on the neighborhood council? Who's an elected official? See, we have quite a few. Well, thank you for serving. Thank you. And every neighborhood is very different. Once a month, we have something called Community Forum. And Community Forum is one representative from each of the neighborhoods gets together in council chambers and has, it's educational. They have meetings, they have presentations that will educate them, and they can go back to their neighborhood and tell them about them. And one of the most fun part is we have a round robin at the end, and we go from each neighborhood, and each neighborhood tells what's going on in their neighborhood. It's a good way to network and meet other people also. So some of the other things that we do, every year we have a bus tour on the 3rd Thursday in April. I rent a 55-seat bus and get sandwiches. We have bag lunches for everyone, and we visit 1/3 of the city every year. So this year, I didn't bring the neighborhoods with me, but you will see it in the digest. Does everybody get the digest and know what the city digest is? It comes out on Fridays by email. Yes, okay. All right. You don't know what it is, make sure we have your email and we'll sign you up for it, because it has the news of the city all in bullets, and you can click on it or not. So what we do is, if we're visiting your part of the city, the leadership team will pick places that they want to go to and speak about them. Like, we might go to the Pavarello, we might go to the Burn Street Bistro, we might go to the Peas Farm. The sky's the limit, whatever you want to go to. And we get off once during the bus. And we have the citizens of the neighborhood get up and come to the front of the bus and pick up the microphone and talk about what we're seeing in their neighborhood. And you could also invite city council or staff from the city, if you would like to also come and speak about special things that are in your neighborhood. One thing that's kind of fun, we play bus tour bingo. So we have 2 bingo cards, and if you get a straight line, you get $10. If you get a blackout, you get $15. So that's kind of fun. Keeps everybody on their toes and paying attention. But everybody really likes the bus tour, because what's so nice about it is, like, you're from Lower Rattlesnake. When was the last time you were in Moose Can Gully?
November.
Oh, well. Oh, you blew it. Well, you know what I mean. We don't always get around to all the other neighborhoods and see these little hidden away secrets and gems that they have in little parks and things like that. So the feedback we get is always really great on that. Every year we have an Outstanding Volunteer of the Year award, and that is coming up in April. And we have one here, Mr. Painter over there. I'm embarrassing him. He was the Outstanding Volunteer of the Year last year. You get a tree planted in your honor. You get your name on a plaque in City Hall. And we do a proclamation in front of City Council with the mayor. And the mayor said that particular day was Mike Painter Day, so he had his own day last year.
Background check still being done.
And Mike has been a fabulous volunteer. So let's see. Oh, that's gone away now. I think. Yeah, I'm ready to use my homepage a little bit just to show you. Our page, the neighborhood page, I think it has about 28 different pages in it, so there's all kinds of information there for you. Okay, so on the side over here, you can see Outstanding Neighborhood Volunteer of the Year. Does everybody see that? So if you click on that, you can get a form, and it has all the information. Why don't I click on it? And I'll just show you. And I started this in 2004, and it was awarded posthumously to Don Stinger. And if you see last year, Mike Painter's right on top of the list there. So that's kind of a nice thing.
You might even recognize some of those names on that.
Okay, that's two of the fun things we do. How many people have traffic circles in their neighborhoods? Okay, good. University, Riverfront, Southgate Triangle. Did I miss any?
Rose Park.
Rose Park, thank you. Those are the neighborhoods. So we have over here Adopt a Traffic Circle. And we do have some that are orphans. Some people moved and some didn't get adopted. But there's 44 in the city. And most are adopted. We have a volunteer recognition. We have grants of $150 each for you to work on your traffic circle. We have free hoses that we give you. I know now's not the right time of the year, but it's good to think about for the spring. And we give a little a gift certificate at the end of the year as we have funds. And I have a nice map on here. Let me see.
Right there, the old traffic circle locations in Curry.
About a third away from the top.
Google Maps.
Okay, thank you. So there they all are, and this was done by Missoula County Extension made this Google page for me, and if you click on those, you can see the people's names who have adopted it. So this spring I'll have to get this together and get a list going and start soliciting in the different neighborhoods to see if I can get some more people to volunteer. This is really great. This is something that really isn't a neighborhood thing. It was a public works thing. But they needed somebody to do it, and of course I raised my hand because I said this is a great way to bring the neighbors together. And it really has been good because people will see other people out working on the traffic circle and they'll say, oh, that's so nice of you to do that. And they meet each other, and so it's all about getting to know each other and working together, and it's just fit in really well with the neighborhood councils.
Hey, Jane, it looks like whether you're a green or a red dot, you are not currently adopted traffic circle.
Yes, red is not currently adopted. I'm not sure how these pink things are something else. Those are restaurants. They never used to be there. I don't know how they got there.
In the key on the left, it says the green.
The green is not is currently adopted, and the red is not adopted. So if you
Typo then.
if you see something near you and you want to raise your hand, let me know, and we can fix you up with that. But it's funny because before none of the other things used to be on there. The map kind of changed. I don't know how that happened. So anyway, and another program that we do is candidate forums. Has anybody been to the candidate forums that we have? The neighborhoods put them on? No? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. And we had them this past year for the current new city council members. There's 6 of them. So every 2 years we get 6 new ones. Their terms are 4 years staggered. And so we have the League of Women Voters come and they help us. And Mary was there filming it for MTAC. Thank you, Mary. She's great. And she comes on the bus tour too. She does video on the bus tour also. And so Everybody got to ask questions. We do it on a very fair and even basis. We have accept written questions, so we don't have any nastiness or anything going on like that. We just try to make it fair and even for everybody and make it a pleasant experience. And let's see, let me just go back. So neighborhood grants is up there. Every year, City Council and the budget gives the Office of Neighborhood $20,000, and $2,000 goes towards small grants, which are $500 each. And you can click on there and apply for a small grant for your neighborhood anytime during the year, as long as there's funding there. And there presently is funding for that, $500 each. Now, the large grants goes on a cycle. The end of October they're due, so once a year. This year we got 14 grants. We awarded 5. There was $63,000 asked for, and we had $18,000 to distribute. So that was kind of very competitive this year. It was very fortunate the MRA decided to fund one of the traffic signal boxes, so that took $1,500 off the board. Plus, Brian von Lossberg, president of the City Council, is working with the mayor on a deer study for the city, and he's working also with the university, and they're looking to come up with the funding for that. So that $7,500 was taken off the table, which was really great. It gave us a chance to concentrate on some of the other grants. And so, like, if you want to sign up for the digest, where it says notify me, you can sign up for it right there. And Leadership Team Resources has things like budgets and how you can apply for extra funds and things like that. I put on training about every other month for the new leadership team members, but I invite everybody to come in the digest. So anybody can come to the training. And the Office of Neighborhoods is neutral, and we work very hard to help all the neighborhood councils do the best they can, and we want to see you succeed. And that's the end of my spiel. Any questions? Yes?
Why are North Side and West Side combined?
Okay, North Side and West Side meet together. They are combined. When neighborhood councils first started, the North Side Homeowners Association and the West Side Homeowners Association always met together. So when neighborhood councils were formed, they asked to be a federation and meet together. And that's why they do that. And they could always split any time that they want to, but they each have their own budgets, but they are autonomous, but they always meet together. It's just always been that way. Any other questions, anyone? It's a lot of fun. I recommend that you get on your neighborhood council. Oh, and I wanted to tell you, remember this, my card is here. My card is here. If by the end of 8 weeks you're saying to yourself, well, gee, I want to get more involved in the city, and you probably will, remember my card. I will help you. If you have any questions or any problems or anything like that, remember my card. I'll point you in the right direction and help you get resources. And also, there's a brochure that kind of has gone through, there's pictures here of a lot of our programs that we've done. There's grants. The second one is traffic circle training. The next one is we do tabling events. This is at Stories and Stones, where at the cemetery in September they have people who portray some of the people who have passed away, and you go around and there's wonderful stories that you get to see. And let's see what I have. On the inside there's actually an action shot of the bus tour. It's moving in the background. That's me, Tim Burke, in the bus tour. And there's a map in here, and also on the neighborhood councils, on each individual web page, every neighborhood has a web page, you can email your leadership team. Here's the address in the blue, or you can just click on the button, and it goes to your leadership team and the Office of Neighborhood if you want to be in contact with anybody. And now I think I'm finished. Any other questions? Yes?
If a neighborhood council person moves to a different neighborhood, Then what happens?
Well, if you become a member of the new neighborhood council, because every citizen within the city limits of the city belongs to a neighborhood council. So if you move, then you're a member of.
I mean, if you're on the
Elected.
leadership.
Then you're no longer eligible to be elected on that one, but you might be able to get elected on your new neighborhood council.
You're not obligated to continue living.
No, you're not. You're not. Yes.
When are the elections and how does that work?
Well, the elections are usually held at a general meeting once or twice a year, as needed. And so sometimes terms are 2 years and they might go a little bit longer, but it's basically generally held at a general meeting once or twice a year. So I've also had a predicament where I've had somebody who was on the leadership team, which is an elected official, become a city council member, and they had to make the hard choice of which elected official job that they wanted to have. So I'm only kidding. Of course, they went to city council, but you can't hold two elected positions at the same time. And it is elected position, neighborhood councils. Yes?
Are all students in the university district considered residents
Yes, they are.
and voting residents?
Yes. Okay, yes?
Yeah, that's one of the things I found so interesting when I first got involved with city, with neighborhood councils, was that even renters are automatically members of the neighborhood councils. Even renters are automatically members of the neighborhood council. You don't have to be a property owner, like in a homeowners association.
Thank you, Patricia. Any more questions? Okay, that's it.
All right, thank you, Jane.
Wonderful. Jane's going to leave her handy-dandy neighborhood council map at the back of the room, so if you want to take a break and take a look at it, please feel free to examine it. I think one of the most interesting shaped one is the two rivers, so I'll let you hunt that one down. Do you need that, Ralph? Nope. Okay. Thank you, Jane.
Thank you. Good night, everyone. Enjoy.
Elena, did you want to ask the group a question?
I'm just dying to know how many people in this room are left-handed. Can you raise your hand? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so the average, I looked this up because I'm also left-handed, the average is 7 to 10%. So that makes us, this is like 30%.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. I don't know what it says about it. I just wanted to take that off.
Bunch of self-pause. The other person I wanted to highlight in the back of the room is my colleague from Ward 3, Gwen Jones. She won't be here every night, but she wanted to hear Dr. Watson, of all people, speak. So, the other thing I wanted to just kind of put this in the back of your head, why we created this particular Citizens Academy. When I came onto council, we had onboarding, which was pretty much drinking from the fire hose, and it's a little bit overwhelming. But what had occurred to me is I've been a teacher all my life, going back to the 6th grade when I was on the basketball court. And as point guard, I would always tell the other point guard to go the other way. So it's just kind of in me that I always want to make people improve and learn things faster than the way I learned them. And so my hope is there are two objectives. One, that you walk away learning something about our municipal government that is actually kind of nifty, and that you might share that with other people. So we're looking for a ripple effect. And the second thing is potential succession planning. I won't sit on council forever. I'm going to need someone else to come up and follow me in my footsteps. And if this is one way that gets you there, so be it. And maybe it doesn't work out that way. Don't feel like you must run for city council. Please don't feel that way. But there are lots of really great ways to give back to our community. Elena, I think, was the very first person who put her hat into the ring for sitting on our animal control board as one of our citizen advisory committees. And all of those actually have an impact on the work that we do at the council level. So just kind of tuck that away. Don't feel compelled to do anything except enjoy yourself. This week we're not going to do it, but next week we're going to be down at City Hall, at City Council Chambers on Pine Street. Following that session, I would like to invite you to walking down to the Rhino and having perhaps an adult beverage or two and carrying on the conversation. Because one thing we learned from this, you don't get a whole lot of time to engage with one another here at the tables. But I know Mike Painter likes a good pint, and he is just a wealth of information as well. So it gives you the opportunity just to carry on the conversation. And without any further ado, I would love to introduce one particular gentleman who I think the first time I ran into him, I gave him a great big hug, and that was out at the industry night.
I was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, too.
And you were wearing a Hawaiian shirt, so I was completely unprepared. We have I know when I it's been a big hole to fill. But Rob has really stepped into the opportunity, and yes, it had challenges, but I think you saw opportunity big and bold. And without any further ado, Rob, it's yours.
Thanks.
So I was told I didn't have to go on till 7, or till 8, I mean, so
You
we'll still have some time to kill.
We have time for it.
Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah.
Do you guys know each other? Is this your first meeting?
First meeting.
Excellent. Excellent. I've got a great icebreaker. Hope you're ready for this. Okay, this is called up downs. Has anyone ever done up downs? Do you know what they are?
I do. Well, I did have with some farm Montana.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So I think that's the same thing.
Can you describe to the group how it works?
Well, I think so. You say something like a characteristic, like who in here is Catholic?
Don't stand up for that
You
yet.
stand up if you're Catholic, and everybody wildly applauds you. We wildly applaud, right, Sid?
We can do that.
We should. Because the thought is that you can see the people across the room that share that similar characteristic.
Perfect. Great explanation. All right, please stand up if you have blue eyes. Brown eyes. Green eyes. All right. Please stand up if you're the tallest person in your family. Shortest person in your family? Please stand up if you have you come from a large family, so more than three or more siblings in your family. 4 or more, remain standing if it's 4 or more. 5 or more. 6 or more. How many? 6?
7.
6. Good job. Please stand up if you're the oldest person in your family. The youngest. And any only child. You're the only child in your family. They have specific characteristics. So you guys will pick those out later when you need them. Let's see. Please stand up if you were born in Montana. Outside of Montana? Outside the U.S.? Okay, where at? Where at?
Germany.
Germany? Brazil. All right, see, there you go. Something you didn't know. Let's see. Okay, traveled over the holiday break. Traveled over the holiday break. Outside of Montana? Outside the country? I don't know if you're going to want to clap for this one. 49ers fan.
I'll blame it up to California.
All right. Kansas City.
Yeah!
Let's see. Please stand up if you're if you're a fan of anyone playing the Dallas Cowboys.
Anyone playing against them?
Playing against.
Thank you. All right. Let's see. New to our community. So here, 2 years or less. All right. 5 years or less. So you'll have to stand again if you. All right. Less than 10 years. Okay. More than 10 years. More than 15 years. Remain standing if it's more than 15. More than 20. More than 25 years. More than 30 years.
You can stop now.
More than 40 years. More than 50 years. More than 55 years. Good job. We're almost done. Let's see. This one's important to me. Please stand up if you're the first one in your family to graduate from high school and or college. Those folks are hands. All right. I'm really curious why you're here. So please stand up if you're here because you want to learn more about our community. Okay, good. How about if you joined just because you want to be involved in the city governance? Maybe. All right. Please stand up if you joined this group because you want to have a voice in governance. Okay. Please stand up if you joined because someone encouraged you to join, encouraged you to apply. Good job. Good job. And then please stand up if you joined for some other reason that I didn't say.
Rabble rousers.
Anyone else? Okay. I appreciate that. I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to go around and meet everybody, but hopefully we get a chance tonight. I'll be able to shake your hand. So for those of you I don't know, I'm Rob Watson. I'm the superintendent of schools. I have to explain that a little bit sometimes. When I was in a class the other day with third graders, and they're like, well, what's a superintendent? And that's a good question. That's a really good question. Sometimes I'm not quite sure what I do. But a superintendent, I always tell the third graders, is like a principal of the principals, if that makes sense. So that third graders seem to understand what that means, principal of principals, so they understand that. I do have to clarify, though, I'm the superintendent of Missoula County Public Schools. That means any district outside of our district I don't represent, like Hellgate Elementary, Target Range, Lolo. Those are districts that are outside of our school district, so I don't represent those districts. They all have their own board of trustees. They all have their own superintendents. One thing I will say is I'm not in an elected position. Some people think this is an elected position. I'm grateful that it's not, because I'd never get elected if it was. I was appointed by our school board. So our school board has 11 members of the board, and those are elected positions, and they appoint or hire a superintendent. I'm actually the only employee in the whole district that they supervise. They supervise me, and then I have to supervise all the other employees, if that makes sense. That's how the governance structure works in our district. If you're interested in getting involved, I encourage you to run for a school board seat. Those are elected positions. We have 11 members on our school board. So if you're interested in those at all, please check out our website. By all means, we encourage folks to get involved. This will be brief. That's a picture of my mother. Does anyone know what grade she's in? No. I gave you a hint earlier.
Third?
Yeah, third grade. She's in third grade. There's two reasons I show you this picture. Number one, I show you this picture of her being in the third grade where she's learning how to read or write because that's a critical age when students make that switch. So before third grade, you'll have to think way back, before third grade, you were learning how to read, right? You were getting all the skills necessary, the letter sounds, how letters get put together. You were learning how to read. After third grade, you are reading to learn. And that's a really important switch. And the reason that's important is because if you don't make that switch, and if you don't use your reading skills to learn, then you're not going to be able to do science or social studies or health enhancement or any of those other subjects because you struggle with those reading skills. So a lot of students make that switch sometime in the third grade, from learning to read to learn. But here's a little tidbit for you. If you don't make that switch, and you have struggled with reading in 4th grade and 5th grade and 6th grade and 8th grade, then those are the types of students that can become dropouts in school. And the reason is because they have trouble in those other subject areas. If they're struggling in reading, then they can't really understand science or social studies or some of those other subject areas. So that's why it's so critical, and that's why third grade is kind of important, like all the other grades. The reason I show you this picture, though, is just to tell you a little, just briefly about myself and why I do this job. So that's a picture of my mom. She's in a one-room schoolhouse in eastern Montana, outside of Miles City. Does anyone know where Miles City is? 3 people? Anybody from Miles City? No? Maybe? Sort of? Your dad? Okay. So what's really interesting, though, is her mother was from Mexico, and her mother was a migrant farm worker. And so there's a whole story on how she ended up in Miles City, right? But she was a migrant farm worker. They were pickers. They would end up outside of Miles City in the sugar beet fields in the summertime, so that's how her mother got to Miles City. Her father was from the Philippines, grew up in the Philippines. He was a rice farmer. Came over on a boat when he turned 18 with his brother, but his brother died on the way over. So her father got off the boat and got on a train and got off the train in Miles City. And so ironically, her mother and father met in the sugar beet fields outside of Miles City. What's really weird is that he was from the Philippines. Her mother was from Mexico. So she and her 6 siblings did not grow up in a literacy-rich environment. Her parents didn't speak English very well. They certainly didn't read or write English. There was no books in the home. There was nobody at home helping her read or write. But her parents knew that education was really, really important. So they trusted the teacher in the one-room schoolhouse to do the education part. My grandmother once told me, she said, all I could do is make sure that they were clean and they were well-fed and that they went to school every day. That's what my grandma's job, that's what she felt her job was. She said, if I could do all those things, then I trusted that the teacher was going to get them the education that they needed. What's an amazing thing about a one-room schoolhouse was anyone educated in a one-room schoolhouse? I should ask that first. Okay, so what's amazing about a one-room schoolhouse is you got all grades there, right? Kindergarten through 8th grade. So she had 5 siblings. Most of them were in that one-room schoolhouse with her at one point in time. The one-room schoolhouse, what's amazing about the history on one-room schoolhouses is that the teacher actually lived on site. Typically lived in the back room of the schoolhouse or lived very close by. So in the evenings, the teacher would tutor my grandmother to teach my grandmother how to read, because my grandmother really wanted to pass the citizenship test. So the teacher actually taught my grandmother how to read as well after hours. So I often tell people, had it not been for that teacher in that one-room schoolhouse, I probably wouldn't be standing in front of you today, because my mother got her education, got her start on her education. My grandmother got her start in reading and writing. My mother went on to become a teacher herself, so education was really important to her. she encouraged me to be a teacher, and she encouraged education in me and inspired education in me. And so every time I thought about giving up, like sometimes you think about giving up in your education. When I was a teenager and I thought about giving up, my mother would get my grandmother on the phone. She would yell at me in Spanish for a while and then tell me, you can't give up, right? And she would tell me this whole story about how hard it was for her to get where she was in life and how hard it was for my mother. So every time I think about giving up, I always remember my mother and how hard she worked and how much education did for her. So a lot of people ask me, why do you do the work that you do? Why do you care about education so much? It's because of that. Because I believe that education can change people's lives. Chances are education or something that are very close to it has changed your life along the way. And so I believe that education has the power to change people's lives. Every kiddo needs the opportunity to have that rich education to get their life changed. Hopefully that happened with you. I tell you that story because that's why I do the work that I do. I believe all of the kids in our district deserve that chance and that opportunity to succeed, and I think they can do so with a high-quality education. So that's why I do the work that I do, but more importantly, that's really what I believe in. That's why I believe in education. Did anyone see that flashing? I'm done. I tell you that story too, though, because you all have stories. Hopefully over this experience you have a chance to share those stories with each other. Hopefully you connected to something in my story. Maybe it was your parents, maybe it was an experience that you had. But I tell you that story because I do believe in the power of stories and the power that we have when we share our stories with each other. So I encourage you to do that. I shared that story with all of our teachers on the first day back because I want our teachers to understand what my motivation is, why I'm here, what I believe in, and I think that's an easy way to do it, is to share that story. She was the first one in her family to graduate from college. She got her teaching degree later in life, so I was actually in, I think maybe middle school when she finally finished her college degree. And her whole family showed up for the graduation. It was really kind of special because she was the only one in her family to graduate with a 4-year degree. So very powerful to see that as a youngster. All right, so when I was considering a new job, so for the last 7 years I was the superintendent of schools in Bozeman. And as I was considering a new job, I started to look around, and one of the things I was looking at is mission statements, because I wanted to make sure that whatever district I applied for or whatever district I landed in, that they would share my mission around my passion for education. So here's our mission statement: to ensure every student achieves his or her potential regardless of circumstances and ability. So when I saw that, I thought I can really agree with that. I can buy into that. I can work towards that because that was important to me, that every student has that chance. I gave you this flyer, so I won't go into a lot of details on this. If you really want to know some of the nuts and bolts, this whole half of the room doesn't have it, do you? Lord, what am I doing? Yeah, I do. I gave you that flyer. I won't go through all the numbers, but if you're interested in knowing some of our numbers, please encourage you to look at those. If you turn it over on the back side, though, I do want to point out one thing. So about a third of the way down on the back side, you'll see sort of a brownish yellow box. Sorry, I'm partially colorblind, so I think it's yellow. Might be brown. It says SBAC, proficient or above. Does everyone see what I'm looking at? That's our state test. And what that shows you, our kiddos in elementary school, they take the test in 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. And so that is the percentage of kids that scored proficient or higher on the math test, and ELA stands for English Language Arts, which is really just a reading test. So that was kind of interesting for me, especially when I looked at the reading test. So if you'll see where I'm looking at, that says 63.3%. Does everyone see where I'm at? So about 63% of our kids scored proficient in reading in elementary school, which means, that's like, 37% that are not proficient in reading in elementary school. So I talked earlier about the importance of reading and the importance of making sure that all kids succeed later in life, and that's a huge marker. That's a marker that I'll be talking to our school board about because if we've got 37% of our kids that are struggling with reading in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, we've got some work to do in terms of helping them succeed after they get out of elementary school. So I just wanted to point that one thing out and talk a little bit about that and as far as reading scores.
Rob, sorry.
Yes?
How do our children compare to the national average?
Well, I don't know the national average. I do know the state average. We're higher than the state average, which is good. But I worry more too about making sure that we maintain that average, that we maintain that higher average. But the state average, I think, is around 60% proficient or above. Okay. When I got here in July, so first of all, I don't know if I can give you a tour because I don't know the building that well. I just got here in July, so, but we'd be happy to figure it out together. What I will tell you is when I got here in July, I asked the school board for permission to do a listening and learning tour. And what a listening and learning tour was is just my opportunity to talk to a lot of people in the community. And I asked some pretty basic questions. What's working, what's not working? What do you hope for the future for our school district? I talked to about 500 people. About a third of those were internal, in-district people, and about 2/3 were outside the school district. So everyone you could think of, teachers and principals and students, parents, community members, community leaders. I tried to just get a really good mix. But the reason I did this is because I wanted to be able to report back to the school board sort of what the community feels are our challenges, and also identify some immediate imperatives that I needed to work on in the first year. Here's what I heard. These are general themes. So folks were really excited about the bond work that has been done to our schools, the construction work that's been done. They were impressed with some of the school improvement, environment improvements, school safety improvements. I didn't really talk to a whole lot of people that weren't really proud of their teachers. So whether it be their child's teacher or a teacher that they had in the past, really proud of the fact of the high quality staff, teaching staff that we attract to our district. We have a really strong relationship between our unions and our school district administration, which seems like it would be not necessarily something people would talk about. But quite honestly, that doesn't exist everywhere. There's a lot of school districts in the country that have horrible relationships with their unions. And one thing that's really bad is when the public sees, district administration fighting with the teachers. That just sends the wrong message to everybody, including the students. So having a strong relationship, I think, is beneficial and helps us. And then folks are really impressed with some of the community partnerships that we had in certain areas. I think probably this is the better part, though, what people hope for the future. You can see the list there. One thing that really impressed me, and I've heard this routinely in a variety of different avenues, is that second bullet. People wanted more inclusion for decision making and for processes that go on in the district. They just want more inclusion for staff and our learners, our students, and our community. So really, I found that impressive to hear that people wanted to be included in discussions. And then also more focus on success for all students. So those are just some highlights from my tour. I want to give you a few updates. I promise I won't do a whole lot, so I want to save time for questions. You know that you probably know that a lot of our schools have been under construction. and renovation. This space right here, that picture you're looking at, is actually taken in the cafeteria right outside the door here. So we still have a few schools under construction. So Sentinel is almost finished, pretty close to being finished. Big Sky is still going to take most of the summer, and it'll probably be done next fall. Does anyone go to Big Sky High School here in the room? I mean, as a student. I should have clarified that. Any Big Sky alumni in here? Okay. Well, if you've ever been to Big Sky, they had a large, what I call, cafetorium. You know what a cafetorium is? It's a cafeteria / auditorium, which doesn't work well for either one, by the way. It doesn't work great for a cafeteria. It works horribly for an auditorium. But what they did at Big Sky is pretty impressive. They've divided that room into a cafeteria and an auditorium there. So there'll be a legitimate auditorium. Got a chance to tour that the other day. They're putting in the sound barriers in there to make sure it actually functions like an auditorium. So pretty impressive stuff with the construction we've done. The other school that's really deep into construction right now is C.S. Porter, our middle school, sort of out there by Big Sky. So that one will also take most of the summer and won't be finished until next fall. Most of the other ones are finished. Lewis and Clark finished right before the school year started, as well as Hawthorne. Meadow Hill is almost finished, and Sentinel, as I said before, is almost finished. But the rest of them are pretty much done. The thing that I was asking our school board about the other day was, what do we do now that the construction's done? How do we maintain these buildings? Because we don't necessarily get any funding from the state for building maintenance. So that's a concern for us, because the only way to get building maintenance money is to ask for a voted levy of our community. Now, we just voted a levy for the construction, so it's really hard to go back out and ask for another levy. At the same time, we want to maintain these buildings, because if we don't do that in 10 years from now, we're going to be dealing with some of that deferred maintenance, which caused the purpose for the original bond. So that's just an issue for us that we're dealing with. I want to talk briefly about staffing. The picture you're looking at there is our new teacher mentoring program. So all those folks there are brand new to our district. Now, a lot of them have teaching experiences from other places, but they're new to our district this fall. Every fall we have about 60 new teachers, and it sounds like a lot, but it's not like we're growing that we need 60 more teachers every year. We have turnover. We have teachers that retire. So there's turnover. We also have teachers that go on leave for a variety of reasons, if they have a baby or they take a leave of absence for a year. So some of those teachers are filling in for teachers that are on leave. And some of them are due to enrollment growth. So we do have enrollment growth in the elementary and middle schools right now, soon to be coming in the high schools. So some of those teachers are just brand new because we needed more teachers because we have more kids. So what I wanted to tell you about that, though, that's really, really interesting is that teaching as a profession is really hard to get folks to go into teaching. And I say that with some experience. So we actually have fewer applicants now than we did 10 years ago. And Missoula is a desirable place to live, and so lots of people want to work here and teach here. But even that we have that going for us, we have fewer applicants than we had 10 years ago. In addition, if you ask kiddos today, there's less and less kids that want to go into teaching. And one way that I know that for sure is the ACT, which is the college entrance exam that you're all aware of. They do an interest inventory, and about 20 years ago, there was about 15 to 20% of the kids that marked on the ACT that they were interested in teaching. A couple of years ago, that was down to less than 5%. So we have fewer and fewer kids that want to go into the profession, which is discouraging, because I'm not going to be around forever. So we need folks to replace us in the profession, which is why that picture is so important. So we started a program a couple of years ago working with our teachers union. We started a teacher mentoring program. And the reason it's important is because teaching is one of the hardest jobs you can imagine, especially a brand new job. If it's your first job out of college, it's really a tough job. And so a lot of teachers wash out of teaching in the first 3 to 5 years. this teacher mentoring program will actually help teachers retain in the profession. It will help us retain those teachers in our school district. So it's a program that actually matches a new teacher with a veteran teacher and works with them throughout that first year to get over some of the hurdles. So I'm encouraged by this program because it will help us retain some of the teachers in the profession. At the same time, we got to figure out ways to encourage more kids to be interested in the profession. Let's see, just a couple of other comments, and then I promise I'll wrap it up for questions. We have a little bit of construction going on with our administration building that's actually creating lots of questions in the community, so I just want to be clear and talk about it here. If you remember where the old Missoula College is, so that's the building that's right next to Sentinel High School. That's where Missoula College used to be, and then they built the building on the river, on the interstate. So they moved, and they vacated that building. They sold that building back to the school district for $1. I know it sounds like a great deal, but there was lots of stuff going on in that building. But basically, we took that building back over. We used to own that building years and years ago, and now we took it back over. We are renovating that building for the purpose of an administration building. We're going to move all of our administrative offices to that location. So if you didn't know already, half of our administrative offices are on 6th Street, and the other half are on South, right next to Sentinel High School. So we're going to move all of our administrative offices to one location in that the old Missoula College building. That's going to take about 14 to 18 months to finish, so not right away, but in about 14 months from now we'll be moving. We will vacate the building on 6th Street. That's the building that's just a couple blocks away from here. We will vacate the building on 6th Street. The school board really has no specific plans for that building. What they're doing right now is the school board is taking requests for proposals from people that might want to lease the building. The board, I get the sense from the board that they don't want to give up assets like that building or land assets. So my sense is they would much rather find somebody to lease the building, like a long-term lease, and hold on to that building if they can. So that's their first step. They're just putting out requests for proposals right now to see if folks want to lease the building. If we don't get any takers on the leasing of that building, then they could put the building up for sale. But again, that's the board's decision. That's one of their responsibilities is managing our land and our facilities. We have experience leasing buildings, so you're probably aware Prescott Elementary is leased to Missoula International School. We also just recently leased Cold Springs, so the old Cold Springs building has been leased now to a daycare operator that's going to open a daycare for about 200 kids, which is great because we get to hold on to that building. It's an asset to the community to have more daycare slots. So again, kind of a win-win for us because it's compatible to the neighborhood as well. So that's what's happening to Cold Springs and our 6th Street building. Questions on that before I move on? People have been asking quite a bit about that building. All right. Last thing I'll mention, strategic planning. We are just launching our strategic plan. We want to be inclusive. We want to make sure folks get their voice heard in our new strategic plan. We sent out a survey. Did anyone complete our survey? A few of you, if you're parents, you may have gotten the survey, or community members. We had about 2,500 responses to our survey, and we're going to use that survey to help structure the new strategic plan. So it was a feedback survey of what's working, what's not working. We'll have 3 public meetings. By all means, you're welcome to attend those. Our first one is Thursday night from 6 to 8 in our boardroom. That's when we'll launch our strategic planning process. So if you really have want to have a voice or want to give input on the next 5 to 10 years of our direction of our school district, by all means, please attend that, and we'll have a chance for public comment at that meeting as well. And then there'll be 2 more meetings. There'll be a meeting in February and one in March. And those dates are available on our website. Last thing, it was important to me to start the year off with a celebration. So I asked that we have all staff members attend a 1-hour celebration at the start of the meeting. I didn't want to call it a 1-hour meeting. Nobody would show up. So it was a 1-hour celebration. The only place that we could get all of our staff members was at Sentinel High School in their gym, which was under construction at the time, so we had to stop construction for a brief moment. That's about 12 to 1,500 folks that work for our school district in the gym. We talked about the importance of education and what I believe in, but most importantly, if you look at the picture on the top, it's really great when you have your own band. Those are our music teachers from around the district that actually made it feel like a celebration because they played some great music for our teachers. And they didn't even have to practice that much. I was shocked. They just kind of came together and played. It was amazing. Professionals. And then the last thing I'll say, I mentioned earlier about the importance of retaining our teaching staff. One of the things that we launched at this celebration was our employee assistance program. So you may work for an employer that has an employee assistance program. We didn't have one in our district. So can you imagine if we employ 1,500 people and we don't have an employee assistance program? And teaching is a stressful job. So we launched an employee assistance program that provides counseling, provides mental health services, provides financial counseling, all sorts of things for free for our staff. And that's all about taking care of themselves. And so one of the things I announced at this meeting is how important it was for them to take care of themselves, because you can't really take care of kids if you don't take care of yourself first. And that's what we said, and that was really important to our staff to hear that we want them to be great in the classroom, and in order for them to be great in the classroom, we had to worry about the whole person. So that's really what that's all about. I was very encouraged to see that program get started. And remember, I talked earlier about retention. That's all about retaining our best employees. If teachers wash out of the profession because they get stressed out, that doesn't do any of us any good. So we want to make sure teachers stay in the profession. That's it. I must be done because my voice is about ready to get out. Yep.
My understanding is that every school in Missoula has homeless children. Could you talk a little bit about that topic? How many homeless kids do you estimate there? What does that mean to be homeless? And what are you guys as a school district doing? Because those are tough circumstances. How do you, what's going on?
Yeah, we do have homeless kids in every building. I don't think that's a huge surprise. And the reason is because the definition of homeless is probably different than what most people think. So there's a federal definition for homeless. And the reason there's a federal definition is because there is some federal money that's tied to those kiddos and getting them some extra help. And in order for us to access that money, we have to account for the number of homeless kids, and we have to define who they are. So homeless doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have a place to sleep, although it could. But for a lot of kids, it means they're doubled up with another family, or their housing is in transition. So maybe they had a house, they lost the house, they're living in a motel for a few days before they can get into another house. That's considered a transitional family, which also classifies as a homeless family. So when you hear the numbers, it is, when I say that we have homeless kids in every school, that's why, is because of the definition. I'm sorry I don't have those numbers off the top of my head, and I can definitely get those for the group. Okay, 500 district-wide. And the one thing that we do is we provide transitional services and support for those families. So we have family in transition coordinators, which are social workers generally that work with those families, and they work wherever the family is at in whatever school, and they remove some of the barriers. So one of the huge barriers around homelessness, if you become, let's say you're an elementary kid and you're going to school at Chief Charlo, and then you become homeless, and your new home is way across town, that could be a huge transition for you to have to go to a new school. So we actually, federal law allows us to keep those kids in their school that they started at and provide transportation so we can get them back to that school, which really helps ease that transition. Because we all know that transitions are difficult, but transitions in school are also very, very difficult. So that's one of the things we do, is provide those services for our families. And then, of course, every one of our schools participates in the backpack program, where we send backpacks home over the weekend with food in them. And that's something that typically happens more in some of our schools, but happens in all of our schools. And several of our schools have food pantries. Willard, Lowell, they have food pantries in the school where families can come in to get free food. So we try to meet families where they're at and make it comfortable for what they're going through. But homelessness is not something that's easily solved, and so what I'm talking about is how we help.
How do you identify? Like, a lot of families probably don't want to self-identify.
No, you're exactly right. That's a great question. So what happens typically is the classroom teacher and or the building principal kind of gets a sense of there's something going on with this family, they're in transition, and typically then we make a referral to the transition coordinator, and she or he contacts the family and just asks them some basic questions. How can we support you? What are you going through? Just trying to build that bond, and that's how we identify them.
I was interested to see that Partners in Healthcare is opening a clinic in the food bank. And so is that going to serve the people of Franklin School in the same way that Lowell Partnership does?
Yeah, I don't know that answer. I'm sorry, I don't. I know that the Partnership Health Clinic on the Lowell on the Lowell School campus serves those kids. I'm not sure which families are going to serve on that side of town, but I'm sure it will be some Franklin families. We just don't have we have a direct partnership with Partnership Health for Lowell, but we don't have any partnership with them for the one in the food bank.
Oh, okay.
So if there's 500 in our school district, how does that compare percentage-wise? That's over 5% of our student population in the district. If your numbers of 9,200 are accurate.
Yep.
How does that compare nationally? Any idea? Or even the state? I'd be interested in the state.
I think if you look at the AA school districts, we're probably a little bit higher than some places and a little bit lower than other places. Around the state, I would say it's higher than most districts in the state. I don't know what the national comparison is. That's a really good question.
Is that a hot topic on your strategic plan then?
Homelessness? I'll tell you, it's something that we feel like we're doing about as good as we can in serving those kiddos, and that's all I'm talking about. We're on the service side, so we're not in the business of preventing homelessness. That's outside of what we do. I wouldn't necessarily say it's a hot topic on the strategic plan, only because we feel like we're doing a lot to serve those kiddos right now. We can always do more, but I go back to that success thing. Homelessness is also a key indicator for kids dropping out of school, and so we have to figure out ways to serve those kids so that they can succeed in school.
Can you talk about teachers' needs for supplies? We hear so much about teachers spending their own money, and then how those of us who aren't, don't have kids in the school system can support or help those teachers.
Let's see. I think I can. There are several organizations in town now that have stepped up to buy school supplies for some of our schools, and that's really eased the burden because. So let me just put it this way. If you're a parent and you get that school supply list at the start of the year and it seems pretty daunting, especially if you're a parent that's struggling in other ways, so there's some organizations that have stepped up and have said, we're going to buy school supplies for the whole school so you don't have to ask from parents. That doesn't happen at all of our schools. But one thing that you can do as a community member is donate to the parent advisory council or the parent-teacher council at that school. Because they can funnel that money for school supplies. As far as teachers spending their own money for supplies, that does happen. I was a teacher for many years. I was a high school teacher for many years, and I spent money on my classroom. So those kinds of things happen. I'm not going to say it would never happen, but it just happens because teachers want specific things for a particular lesson, so they go out and buy some things. On the other side of that, we just adopted brand new curriculum, reading curriculum for all of our grades, K through 12. That comes with a lot of supplies already, so I feel like we're doing a pretty good job making sure that teachers have the basic supplies that they need. But teachers always are looking for other things. If you go into any teacher's classroom, chances are they've begged, borrowed, and steal some things in their classroom, and that's the nature of the teacher. My mother was a teacher for many years, so I remember all the things that she kept in her classroom. So that just happens, but I wouldn't say that teachers are not buying their own supplies. I think they are. But we try to provide for them so that they don't have to provide the basics, but they'll always buy stuff above and beyond. There's also several community grants. There's lots of community grant programs that supply teacher supplies, so I think that helps a lot. Yes, sir.
Do you know the names of any of those organizations and any folks you may want to share?
I'm just thinking of, well, for one, Missoula Education Foundation. That's our partnership foundation for our school district. They give out teacher grants every fall, and the way they give out those grants is they take donations throughout the year, and then in the fall there's an application process. So if as a teacher, if I wanted X, Y, or Z for my classroom, I would apply for one of these teacher grants. So that's one, Missoula Education Foundation. The other ones are more tied to businesses, so we get grants through one class at a time. You probably have seen those grant awards on television. The one class at a time grants are something that's supported by businesses. Yes, sir.
Hi, Rob. My name is Brian. Thank you for what you do.
Yeah.
I'd like to tell you my story with MCPS, and then I'll end with a question.
Okay.
So I've been an educator for years in different formats. I taught at the U of M for a bit. And I've taught high school and middle school biology. I have a master's of science in ecology. I spent a few years teaching an international system middle high school biology, which recently came back from 2 years ago. I was interested in continuing at that level. So I inquired about getting hired at MCPS and how those jobs are filled and the whole process. And I learned that you hire a lot of teachers that are current subs, so subbing is a good route to get into being hired. So I went down that route 2 years ago and became a sub. I was getting paid $11.30 an hour, which is less, as many people in this room know, that's less than a teenage babysitter gets paid. That's pre-taxes. And so, that story came up when you said you had trouble finding people to apply for jobs teaching here. And I'm curious if you can speak about the disparity between staff teaching salaries and benefits packages versus subs, because I actually think that the salary here is quite good relative to a lot of other places.
Yeah, it is good. The sub rate has never been good, and any district I've ever worked in has never been great. And so that's something that we continue to add money to. So it's a little higher, I believe, now than it was, but it's still not what it should be. I mean, it should be at least $15 an hour, in my estimation, in order to attract people. And we don't have enough subs right now. We can't get subs, and part of it is due to salary.
When I left.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean,
there's definitely
it's hard to get applications, it's hard to get subs, but
there's definitely a push-pull there. It's something that we continue to push towards, but we haven't hit that $15 an hour rate yet, but that would be a long-term vision for me, because I think we need to be there. We continue to lack subs for other reasons as well. It's a very difficult job, as you know, and it doesn't pay enough, and so sometimes people do the job just because they don't, it's a temporary job for them. They're in the middle of something or something like that. So we don't have a lot of people that are dedicated subs, which causes other problems too, because there's certain days of the week we can't get subs, like Mondays and Fridays, because of that, that interim thing. So there's lots of issues with that. I don't have a solution for you, but I will tell you that we need to raise the sub pay.
So subs really don't belong to the union. Is that salary at all part of the union process?
It's not. It's all one pie, though, I will tell you that. So we just negotiated salaries last year with our teachers union, and we negotiated like a 2% raise. But it comes out of the same pie as everything else. So we often tell teachers, if we put 2% here, then we can't necessarily use it other places because it's all one pie. So it has an indirect impact on what we can pay subs when we negotiate contracts with teachers.
You talked a little bit earlier about
building maintenance on buildings that you're monitoring for now, how much do you think you have to come up with for your team?
So, if you read, and maybe you're more familiar with this than I am, but I'm not a facilities guy, but what they tell you, I think it's 3% of replacement value every year that you need to invest in maintenance. Otherwise, you're going to end up with years of deferred maintenance. So 3% of replacement value is quite a bit when you consider all the facilities we have in the community. I would say that probably between 100 to 300,000 in our high school district per year, and maybe between 300,000 and 500,000 in our elementary district per year. And the way the state has set this up is you can ask for maintenance levies from your voters. You can ask for any length of time. Most districts go about 5 years on a maintenance levy because by then the cost of doing the maintenance has increased so much that the dollar is not the same. So 5 to 6 years maintenance levy, maybe 200,000 at the high school level, 300,000 at the elementary. That would help defer some of or get rid of some of our deferred maintenance. But the issue comes, what do you do after that? You have to keep asking for that, otherwise your deferred maintenance will stack up again. So it's not a huge amount, but the hard part is when folks realize that we just paid $150 million for all these buildings, now you're asking for another $100,000 or $300,000. That's hard to explain to folks. I think what's easier to explain is, we don't want these buildings to end up in the same place they were. And so if we don't invest in a little bit of maintenance every year, we end up with years of deferred maintenance, which is what we have. All right, I just put everybody to sleep with the facility.
With the redistricting or moving the boundaries recently and the bus routes and all that, have you gotten much blowback on that? Has it been an issue?
It's a sensitive topic for any parents that buy a house in one zone and realize that they've been rezoned to another area. So it's a sensitive topic. When you say blowback, what I would tell you is that throughout the summer, when we had to break the news to these families that you're now in a new zone, we received some concerns and blowback. What they did is they grandfathered kids in that were already in the school, so it was a little softer blow, I guess, in that respect. We still have some work to do on that. We haven't finished with the boundary discussion, but we need to do a little bit of research on how our schools are currently being used.
On the boundaries conversation, I just keep hearing about people going out of their district to different schools, and I know that's kind of being cut this next year in terms of people not really being able to kind of just move from Franklin to Paxton, for example, right? But in the programs that I think that there have been people who really wanted to get their kids into certain programs, who is it that decides kind of what school will get those programs, and is there anything that's on the horizon for some of those schools for like the language program or the IB program or something?
So I'm glad you asked the question, and I'll be brief. Those decisions were made in the previous strategic plan. So if you're interested in those types of decisions, get involved in our strategic planning process. My concern is that our job is to make sure all kids succeed, no matter which school they're at, and the way that we can do that is make sure we have high quality programs at every school. And so that's my goal. I think those programs are great programs, but we can't replicate those at every school because we just don't have the money to do that. So there's a sustainability issue with those programs, like how can we continue those programs, or how can we replicate? Because we don't have a whole lot of extra money for those sorts of things. Those programs were started with grant money, and some of that grant money continues, but you're familiar with how grants work. Once it runs out, you got to figure out how you're going to sustain it. So I don't believe that you'll see those programs replicated at other schools, but if you're interested in getting involved in the discussion or strategic planning process, is the perfect place to do it, because that's where those decisions were made, 8 years ago. It was in the strategic planning process.
Rob,
I always look at the list of schools that we have, and I'm like, oh yeah, I've been to all those, until I get to Steely Swan. And I don't know, I always find that to be kind of like the oddball. Not that I'm opposed to Steely Swan by any means, but it's just because it's so far removed from where we are. Has it always been that way? Talk about them branching off and just being their own school?
I think they talk about that. I think they talk about that up there occasionally, and you may still hear about that. That decision was made many years ago when they decided to, that they wanted a high school there and they wanted to remain with. Because at one point in time, those kids would have had to come to town, right, to go to high school, because that's still in our county. And so that decision was made to build a high school there, and I support that decision. We have put some of our bond money went into renovations there as well. I try to go up there about once a month, but I don't always make it. But we have great staff up there. I think what's encouraging for me is those kids are getting access to the same curriculum and the same high quality standards as they would in one of our urban schools. They may not have all the same programs, but they have the same curriculum and the same standards and the same high quality teaching staff. So I think there's a lot to that.
What level of interest does the administration and the school district as a whole have with partnering and developing relationships with nonprofits or private organizations to continue? You specifically talked about children in that pivotal learning curve about transitioning from learning to read to learn other academic programs outside of school time.
We have a ton of partnerships already, but always encouraging more help. So one of the reading partnerships we have right now is with the United Way. They're doing a ton of work in that 0 to 5 area, but they also have helped us with the kindergarten through 3rd grade reading stuff as well. So there's a lot of support from the United Way. But if you look at those reading scores, the only way we can really affect those is we have to address that issue as a community. We have to talk about it as a community, and we're going to need help from all sorts of different folks to really address that. We can do as much as we can in school, but we need help from nonprofits. And we already have quite a few partnerships, but we're always welcome to talk to others.
And how would, if somebody wants to open that door, who would be the appropriate person?
It depends on what nonprofit it is. So at the ad building, we try to divide those up so not one person gets hit with all of them. But yeah, you would just call my office and we would direct you in the right direction.
If you were looking at the community member, you didn't have a kid in school, you were looking at the community member help, how would you do that? How do you do that?
We have a volunteer process that's pretty good. There's just some steps, some hoops you have to jump through, and the only reason is we now in today's day and age with security and safety, there's a volunteer process that we ask you to go through, a small background check. But once you get through that, then you're part of our volunteer list, and there's lots of opportunities to volunteer, whether it be volunteering in the classroom or connecting with the PTA to volunteer to help at an event, and or volunteer just to read to a kid. So Hawthorne, is anyone connected to Hawthorne Elementary here? Okay, Hawthorne did a great program this fall. They had a chunk of kindergarten kids that showed up that weren't ready to read, and we don't expect kids to be able to read in kindergarten, but we had a chunk of kids show up that really needed some basic things like letter sounds and look how to read a book from top to bottom, left to right, just those basic things. So Hawthorne recruited, 20 community volunteers that came in throughout the week and would pull a kindergarten kid out of class and just work with them until they got up to that point where they were ready to read.
So along the line of question, should someone just reach out to the school that they want to support, or?
It's easier to do that, to find a volunteer opportunity in the school first, and once you've found it, then go through the volunteer process. That's probably the best way.
What would be your personal top 3 priorities for the next 5 years?
Reading. Reading is a big one. I think that's key. I think getting our entire community on the same page of what it takes to be successful K through 12. And I say that because I'm a parent myself, and if you ask me, what does my 8th grader need to know to be successful after high school, I couldn't tell you, and I'm an educator, right, and I should know that. I think our entire community needs to get on the same page. Like, what does readiness look like in kindergarten? What does it look like in third grade? What does it look like in eighth grade? Get all of us on the same page, moving in the same direction. Then we can have those rich discussions about programs, like which programs we need to abandon and which programs we need to bolster. But we don't have a common definition right now, so that would be another one. So that'll come with our strategic plan, so I'm encouraged by that. And then the third thing I would say is culture. So the culture of our district is healthy, and I want to maintain that. When I talk about culture, I mean the relationships that we have between teacher to teacher, teacher to administrator, teacher to student, maintaining a high-quality culture in our district, because that'll trump everything. If you have a bad culture in an organization, it really can be very detrimental, especially in a school organization. So maintaining our culture.
Could you talk a little bit about cultural relevance in our high schools? Because when I was in high school, there was no. It's such a different thing, and why we have it, the good things and the unintended consequences from it, and in the future, it's always.
Yes. So speaking of culture.
High school is huge.
It is.
We know about it. So.
Yeah. Speaking of culture, that is a culture of our district, right or wrong. It's been that way for quite a while, not forever, but for quite a while. So I worked in the district 10 years ago, and that was the culture then as well. So I know it predated that as well. The culture is that it's okay in high school if you want to go to a different school. You just have to make application, and if you get accepted, then you can go to a different school. That's the culture. The positives of that is that we have different programs, slightly different programs in each high school. So if somebody wants to do the Health Science Academy, then they have to go to Big Sky to do that. So we do have some slight program changes in each school. So that's a positive. The other positive I see, and I'm not trying to give you an opinion on this, it's just the positive that I see is that if high school is not relevant for a kid, if they don't find relevance, they will end up dropping out, some kids, and so that's a concern. So if we can find a way to make it relevant for kids and make them engaged, and if that comes through an opportunity to make a choice, then I'm all for that, because if we can keep them engaged, then they'll graduate high school. The downside, the unintended consequences, is people are transferring for the wrong reasons. They're transferring for athletic reasons, or they're using the system and making multiple transfers. You know, they are kind of shopping around, I guess, the way to say it. So that's probably not good, but that's an unintended consequence. So what we have to do in the future is define, if we're going to allow transfers, we have to define what it's going to look like and what sort of limits we're going to put on it, because we don't have any limits right now. They can pretty much transfer for any reason they want to.
How's your shift been from Williston to here and
Thanks for the question. It's been a wonderful experience. It's a lot of work, but I knew that coming into it. I would tell you that the two communities are fairly similar. I know we always talk about Bobcat and Grizz, but the two communities are more similar than they are different, and so that's been good. Lots of support for education in both communities. Lots of interested people wanting to be involved in both communities, so I think that's healthy.
Rob, would you also just touch on the value of the Missoula about
I would. Yeah, I definitely would. The school itself was rebuilt, which is wonderful. I think that shows how much value our community places in that program. Because, you know, if we didn't value the program, we would just have left them in the old building or moved them to a different building or done something like that. So the fact that we built the school, I think, it shows that the community values the program.
If you could just stand on that for the folks who've been here less than 5 years.
Oh, sure. So Willard School is a school that accepts students from all the high schools, and they accept students that want a different learning experience. It's a smaller learning experience, so for some of our kids, walking into the school with 1,200 other kids is just intimidating. It's too much, and so if you want a smaller learning experience, it's a more of a family atmosphere. There's fewer teachers, fewer students. They really focus on helping kids get where they want to go, sometimes faster or shorter. But it's a really positive environment. We have a wonderful staff there, and now that we've rebuilt the building, so we've rebuilt the building on the same site, now they have a wonderful educational environment that supports their learning. So I think there's a lot of positive things going on with Willard right now. In the long run, it helps us with our dropout rate. So if we can encourage a kid to get engaged there and not drop out of school, that really helps our entire community.
Can I add on to the Willard? I know that every school has homeless, and Willard has probably a fairly significant chunk of homeless kids. And one of their big asks when they were designing the building was to have washer dryers.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have a place to wash it.
Yeah.
So in terms of MCCS, really trying to provide those services, things like that, I think are huge. And we wouldn't necessarily think of that, but yeah, if clothes aren't clean, it's kind of hard to engage.
There's a question over here.
Yeah. Quick comment, Willard has a really diverse population. I was a Willard graduate myself, so really awesome program, and I just needed to finish up, and so I did my senior year in 3 months and was done with it.
Yeah.
My question is, with the boundary line relocations, my understanding is that many of the elementary schools are still functioning at capacity or near capacity. So what's the long-term goal with that? Because we've just rebuilt all these schools, so obviously we probably wouldn't be utilizing one of these other buildings that hasn't been remodeled. Do you have any ideas?
So when you say at capacity or near capacity, it depends on the grade level. The only school that's at 500 right now is Jeanette Rankin. Mm-hmm. There's no other school at 500, and that's the capacity of each school is 500. There are some grade levels that are full, even in some of our smaller elementaries. 3rd grade might be completely full if you only have 2 teachers, and once you get 40 kids, it's full. So it's kind of a moving target to say that they're at capacity. I would say as we looked at the long-term projections, even at Lewis and Clark, it goes up to maybe 515 and then it drops again. That's what the projection is showing. So the question for our community is, can we live with 515 for a few years if it drops again rather than reshuffling the boundaries? Or do we continue to see this growth in enrollment that isn't slowing down? And all of that's really hard to predict. We had a larger incoming kindergarten class this year than we expected, about 70 kids more at kindergarten than we expected. So if that trend continues, then we will have to look at boundaries again. But right now, we feel like we're doing okay. But there'll be a couple of years where it's pretty tight.
Can I just clarifying question on that? I looked at I was looking at the numbers of the kids per school, and in Franklin School is actually pretty low. Mm-hmm. It's like in the 300s.
Yep, Franklin, Lowell, and Russell.
And so what does that mean, I guess, for the school having a lower number of kids? Just like smaller classrooms, or just like a class? Like instead of having 3 3rd grade classes or like 4, now you just lose a classroom? What does that?
Yeah, you got it exactly right. The number of classrooms is dictated by the number of students. If we have need for 4 classes in 3rd grade, then we'll have 4 3rd grade teachers. If we only have need for 3, then we have 3 3rd grade teachers. What I think it means is a smaller learning environment myself. I think if you look at our schools like Lowell and Franklin, which are our Title I schools, as well as Russell, having a smaller population could actually be beneficial for those kiddos, perhaps getting a little bit more attention than they would in a larger school.
And specifically speaking to the schools in that neighborhood, are you guys looking long-term at Missoula's growth plan about concentrating high-density residential development in that area, and are those schools prepared to handle that growth?
Which area, Franklin or Lowell?
Franklin and Lowell.
Yeah, so Franklin, plenty of room in Franklin, not worried about that. What I worry about is middle school. That's a bigger issue because the closest middle school is C.S. Porter, which is getting full because C.S. Porter also gets kids from Miller Creek and from Lowell. So if we see a lot of growth in Franklin and Lowell specifically, then we're going to have to do something in middle school.
Your summer program too. I watched this past summer at Russell where the school was open for kids to come, and I actually saw kids going there, which struck me as a good sign. And that's going to continue. That's part of the district's plan with that food program and
It is.
Access to the school.
Yep, access to the school and libraries, which I think is critically important for summer reading. So yeah, that'll continue. Thank you. You guys are tired. No, I'm looking at you.
Any other questions for Rob? Okay, let's give a round of
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I think in the style of what was it? A stand-up?
Up downs.
What was it?
Up downs.
Up downs. If you learned something tonight, please stand up and give yourselves a round of applause. Thank you all. Next week, we are going to be at City Council Chambers, where we will be learning about the 3 branches of government at the local level. So we're going to have the mayor, we're going to have that's Mayor John Engen, Council President Brian von Lossberg, as well as our municipal judge Kathleen Jenks. And also on the docket for next week is Sarah Winfrey, who's from our Masters of Public Administration program here at the University of Montana, just to round it out a little bit. 7 o'clock, we'll see you next week. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.